She had walked into hundreds of lounges like this before. Polished floors, soft lights, and quiet whispers. But this time, the silence felt different. Eyes followed her, not with admiration, but with suspicion. She was dressed in the same tailored suit she wore to board meetings, carrying the same black card that opened every door. Yet the moment she stepped inside, a manager's glare cut through the room like a blade. In just 5 minutes, a single act of arrogance would turn into a storm no one saw coming. And as the clock ticked, a question hung in the air. What happens when you underestimate the wrong person? She was a woman who built everything from the ground up. A first-generation college graduate, a founder, a CEO who had spent years turning boardroom skepticism into respect. That morning, she wasn't just another traveler passing through the airport. She was heading to a global conference where she would deliver a keynote speech about leadership, power, and representation. The lounge was a quiet space, reserved for executives, high-tier travelers, and VIP guests. To her, it was familiar territory, the kind of place where she prepared presentations and reviewed contracts. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged. But the energy in the room shifted the moment she entered. People stopped mid-sentence. A few heads turned, eyes scanning her like she was in the wrong place. She'd seen this look before. The same silent questioning. The unspoken, "Are you sure you belong here?" She approached the counter with her membership card, a symbol of her status and success. Behind the polished granite stood a manager, someone who believed they owned this space, someone who read her presence not as a customer, but as a challenge, unaware of the storm ahead. She found a seat near the window overlooking the runway. She opened her laptop, focused on her notes. Around her, quiet whispers grew. The tension wasn't loud, but it was sharp. She felt it press against her back like invisible hands pushing her out. In the next few minutes, she would go from being quietly ignored to being publicly humiliated. The manager's footsteps echoed across the lounge floor, firm, deliberate, loaded with the kind of authority that isn't earned, only assumed. Each step tightened the air a little more. In a space designed to make travelers feel at ease, she suddenly felt like she was standing trial. He didn't need to say anything for the message to be clear. His presence carried judgment. And the people around her, businessmen, frequent flyers, staff, seemed to feed on that energy. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was targeted. Without a word, he gestured toward the entrance, as if her very existence in the room was a violation. The membership card she had worked so hard to earn, the status she built through relentless effort, meant nothing in that moment. All he saw was what he wanted to see. There was no misunderstanding. There was no confusion. It was the same old story told in new places. She closed her laptop slowly, steadying her breathing. It wasn't the first time someone tried to erase her presence, but something about the ease with which he dismissed her, as if it was his right, left a mark. The room watched, some pretending not to, others fully invested in the unfolding spectacle. And then, like a storm gathering over calm waters, things began to move fast. Security was called. Not because she did anything wrong, but because she refused to shrink. She refused to make the scene easier for their comfort. While he barked silent orders and pointed fingers, she reached into her bag and pulled out her credentials. Not a simple membership card, but the kind of identification that carried weight. She had personally signed deals with the airline's executive partners. Her company was a major stakeholder in multiple collaborations. The irony was bitter. The manager had just tried to remove one of the people who made their elite lounge possible. But she didn't lash out. She didn't shout. She just let the storm unfold. Around her, whispers shifted tone. Some people recognized her. Others pretended they didn't. But one thing was becoming very clear. The manager had made a mistake. A big one. Within minutes, her assistant, already at the terminal, made a quiet call. The kind of call that travels fast through corporate chains. The kind that doesn't just bring attention, it brings consequences. The security team hesitated now, glancing at their radios, waiting for instructions they didn't fully understand. Something was shifting behind the scenes, And in that moment, she simply sat back down, opened her laptop again, and waited. Calm, unbothered, like a storm that knows it doesn't need to shout to be heard. 5 minutes later, the entire tone of the lounge changed. The same manager who had strutted toward her with arrogance now stood pale, phone in hand, listening to a voice that clearly didn't sound forgiving. Corporate headquarters had been notified, not through a complaint, but through an executive channel that bypassed every layer of bureaucracy. Her name wasn't just on a membership list. It was on investment agreements, sponsorships, and executive boards. She wasn't just in the lounge. She helped build the ecosystem that funded it. The lounge went silent, the kind of silence that only comes when people realize they've misjudged someone completely. Eyes that once carried judgment now carried fear and confusion. Even the security staff shifted uncomfortably, unsure of their place in the hierarchy anymore. Then, one by one, phones began to ring. Emails hit inboxes like warning shots. A directive came down from the top, swift, unambiguous, and final. The manager's entire team was ordered to stand down. By the end of that day, none of them would be working there again. Corporate had seen enough. What was supposed to be a routine act of discrimination had just cost them their jobs. The same people who whispered behind her back now whispered for a different reason. The power dynamic had flipped so fast, it left the room frozen in place. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to explain herself. The facts spoke louder than anything else. In those 5 minutes, arrogance met accountability. A quiet woman they thought they could humiliate became the reason they lost everything they thought they controlled. As the sun cast a soft glow over the runway, she sat there, calm, composed, and resolute. She hadn't wanted revenge. She hadn't planned for it. All she did was exist in a space that should have welcomed her. But for some, that was enough to provoke prejudice. The lounge, once tense with judgment, now felt unnaturally quiet. The staff who remained kept their distance. Some of the same passengers who had looked down on her now looked away, too ashamed to meet her eyes. But she wasn't here for their validation. She never had been. Her assistant arrived moments later. With quiet efficiency, everything that needed to be handled had already been done. No yelling. No fighting. Just truth, power, and consequences. Injustice often hides behind polite smiles, behind uniforms and badges and policies. But this time, the mask slipped. And when it did, it revealed how fragile their authority truly was. She boarded her flight not with satisfaction, but with clarity. She had no interest in making them fear her. She wanted them to remember her. To remember what happens when people make assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't. The world often underestimates people who don't fit its narrow definition of power. But the most dangerous thing you can do is mistake quiet confidence for weakness. As the plane ascended into the sky, one thought lingered. How many more stories like this happen every day, but never end with accountability? She knew this moment wasn't just about her. It was about the next woman who walked into a room and wasn't seen for who she truly was. And maybe, just maybe, because of this moment, someone might think twice before assuming they have the right to decide who belongs.